Hello, friends. This episode today is dedicated to the brilliant and amazing Rachel Horton White. We recorded this episode together just a few short months before I went on the hiatus way back in 2024, and the episode unfortunately never got produced until now. Rachel, as you will see, is a very highly intuitive soul and is a very caring and compassionate person who in recent times has had a very difficult but brave bout with cancer. And she revealed that in one of her recent email posts to her followers. And I'm hoping to welcome her back on the show at some point in the near future as a follow-up to this episode, so she can give us an update on her story and share how she approached her battle from an awakened person's perspective. Because some of the things that she shared about that journey were extremely intriguing, as is most of this episode today, as you will see. I'm glad this episode finally gets to see the light of day, and no better time than now to celebrate Rachel's survival on her amazing journey of life. Best wishes to you, Rachel, for your continued health and happiness.
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you. You won't get to choose how long you're here. You won't know how many sunrises you have left. You don't get to rewind, pause, or skip the hard chapters. All you get is now. This moment, this breath, and most people waste it. Waiting for the perfect timing, for clarity, for permission.
For those of us living a life where our purpose doesn't need permission, capturing fulfillment and meaning in every moment we're alive. This is the Live This Life podcast. And I'm your host, Heath Cummings. I'm here to inspire you to ask yourself the question every day. Are you living? Are you killing time?
What's going on, everybody? Today we have the brilliant Rachel Horton White joining us. She is a clinical hypnotherapist as well as a specialist in the Akashic Record, which we're going to get deep into whatever that is today. I'm sure a lot of people might not know what that is, but it's a fascinating subject once you start to dive in on what it is. We have several close mutual friends as well. One of those being Brandon Thomas. She's been on his podcast, the Expanding Reality podcast, as well as Ben Carroll is a very close contact of hers as well, our new co-host for the Live This Life podcast. And I've been trying to circulate around Rachel and get her on the show for quite a while now. We've been in contact for quite a while, and we're finally able to connect. And I'm excited to have her talk about all these areas of knowledge because I've heard her a lot on several other podcasts, and she has a very broad and amazing spectrum of knowledge on so many different and intriguing things. So Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Heath. It is awesome to be here.
I'm super excited to have you on here. I have a feeling this is going to be one of the better conversations that I have had in quite a long time. Your knowledge base is just so broad on so many different things. So it's going to be tough to try and keep this narrowed and be able to get things into an hour and a half episode, but I'm sure we'll, or hour and a half, wherever we end up cutting it off. But, tell us a bit about number one, you're clinical hypnotherapist. So that in and of itself is fascinating to me. And I'd kind of like to hear what made you want to get into that. But how did the progression was that first? Was that sort of like the first steps in where you were? Like, how did things develop for you and all of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It wasn't actually hypnotherapy. I was not looking for. It was like a lot of people. I'd heard of hypnosis, and I was like, well, that's kind of weird. What is that? But it was really intuition and like trying to just open my third eye and honestly, that was kind of how I was guided to hypnotherapy. But everything I do was really just because I was so miserable and stuck in my former career. I was doing nonprofit management, like social service work, which was great for a little while, and it's honorable work. But I just got so completely burnt out, and it was, I really give so much credit to this woman who was a former life coach, and I'd hired this life coach to help me figure out what the heck I was going to do because I just couldn't do my career anymore. I didn't know what else to do. I thought I didn't have any experience in anything else. And she helped me kind of start meditating again and connecting with light, higher guidance again. And that's when things started happening. I started awakening. I started this business, Soulful Work Intuitive Consulting. And then I went back to school at the Southwest Institute for Healing Arts, which is also known as SWIHA in Arizona, but I did it all online. And I wanted to learn about angels and intuitive guidance and mindfulness. And I was really interested in meditation and just vibration and energy. And so that was really what I was fascinated in. And I wanted to learn more about that. But it was in the program, they had a hypnotherapy component. And so I was like, all right, I'll check that out. It was like included. So I just started reading about it and became absolutely fascinated with hypnotherapy and how powerful it is to reprogram what's in the subconscious, limiting beliefs, thoughts, stories, just behaviors. And of course, I've gotten hypnotherapy many times myself, and I work with clients now. And it's crazy. I'll just tell you real quick, just an example of what hypnotherapy can do. I had a client who for like 3 years had headaches, like just really persistent headaches. And we talked about, she'd been to like the different doctors and all kinds of things to try to deal with her headaches. She was going to go get an MRI and nothing, like there was nothing wrong with her. No, the test showed nothing was there. She had trauma, she had some pretty serious childhood trauma. And so we had done some work around that. And then eventually we came to this place where this sounds a little strange, but she gave me permission to talk about this, where she really seemed like she had an attachment, like a spirit sort of attachment, like this dark energy that was with her. And she identified it herself. So we did some writing, separating from it. I even brought in some like prayers, bringing in like the Lord's Prayer when you're dealing with, it was dark, like I'm talking dark. And then we did a little sort of energetic hypnotherapy separation of clearing it away. And the next day, I mean, this sounds so crazy, but she emailed me about a week later. She's like, my headaches are gone. She's like, I wanted to wait a week just to see, but she's like, they're gone. And so it's just, I'm such a fan of hypnotherapy and what it can do to really clear away stuff. So that's a long answer to your short question, but any chance I get to talk about it, I love it because it's so amazing, and a lot of people don't understand a lot about it. So
there's so many different parts of just that I want to talk about. But I guess one of the quick things I want to dive into real quick was just that change in life, because that was almost one of the main things I started this podcast over, because I had a similar journey where I left something that I didn't like doing and was moving into something, even in the progress right now of moving into something I'm much more in alignment with, who I am and what I want to do. It's something that I think that so many people are searching for right now, is just that life fulfillment. It's so hard to spend so much of your time at a 9-to-5 that is it's draining, or it's just not in alignment with who you are. What made you? It was sort of like, what were the steps that you took to just get there? Even just like a summary version of it, because some people just don't even know where to get started to. Even if it's just a part-time, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, go in a direction of what they want to do. But I think you said you had something like a life coach that helped you out with it. But
yeah, I mean, sometimes we need help from another person, because it's hard to see when we're in it, it's really hard to see a way out, and I had always gone to yoga, and I was interested in spirituality, and I was always interested in tarot, and I had learned meditation. I'd studied like Shambhala Buddhism a little bit, but I kind of stopped after I had kids, and when I didn't hire this life coach until my daughter. I have 2 kids, and she was a baby, so my second child. So I really hadn't done meditation once my kids were born. I hadn't done much of it after my son was born, and because I was just busy and. But it was having this person kind of like give you, like a doctor, give you a note and saying, this is your prescription. This is what you need to do. And I was paying her a decent amount of money. So I wanted to get my money's worth. And that's what she said, start meditating, start talking to higher guidance. So it was kind of like, I just did what she told me to do.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know. I said I had heard that she had helped somebody else quit her job and start a new career, and the person was so happy. And so I just kind of was like putty in her hands. I was like, just I'll do whatever you tell me. But I had to I was at a pretty rock bottom place. I was not as rock bottom as some, but I was grinding my teeth at night. I was just crying, like angry, crying, like just a mess, and I was not really present for my kids because I was so unhappy. Just, I didn't want to be in this job anymore. And I just felt so stuck because I was like, I would look for other jobs, but I knew that I couldn't just go to more of the same thing in a different place. So I think, for people that are in that place, like you said, the one thing that I would suggest, if somebody doesn't feel like, they're not ready to hire somebody else to help them, it would be to start quieting the mind. Just like a few minutes of space of, coming into the breath, just going outside, looking, sitting next to a stream, looking up towards the sun, just taking that time to like clear away the thoughts and connect in with your heart can help kind of clear away all the clutter and all the just confusion of thoughts about which way to proceed, and really connect us with what feels right, with like, okay, what's the next step for me to take? And that's like the beginning. I think in a deeper level, it also trains the brain to begin to let go of all the fears that keep us in our safe yet miserable place anyway, right?
Yeah.
And that's because the comfort zone is familiar and is known versus the unfamiliar, which to our protective ego, that part of us that, wants to keep us safe, that wants to know the path, that is all action goal oriented and isn't all bad, but it really can hold us back with a lot of self-defeating thoughts. It can, quieting the mind or meditation. I like to call it quieting the mind because it seems like easier than meditation, everything that seems like a big deal. It can really help us separate from those fears and doubts and not listen to them as much and not, let ourselves be held back by them.
Yeah. I think it's funny how many people are going through, for as long as I can remember, there's not a whole lot of people I've ever met that were head over heels enthusiastic about their jobs. There's not many people who click their heels when they jump out of bed and say, oh, goody, I get to go to work today. There's a limited few people in this world who have those kind of professions, those lifestyles. And then for the people who are trying to seek that, I feel like that's been something that's been gaining momentum in the last few years, just meeting so many people who not only they're thinking about it, but they're starting to take the steps to do it. And when I have someone reach out to me, I do coaching on a very limited basis, and it has to be the right person. I have to make sure that I'm a right fit for them and everything else. It's pretty much that is the number one thing. And I think the I don't know, ailment, affliction, whatever you want to call it, that affects most people that are in that situation is literally exactly the opposite of what you were saying, is the bombardment of so much stuff coming at you every second of the day. Of if it's not a job, it's bringing the kids somewhere. And if it's not bringing the kids somewhere, it's a relationship issue or whatever. It's like you never get the chance to silence your mind, to allow that higher guidance, that intuition, or just like we did when we were kids, like allow yourself to actually dream of something that excites you and try and figure out in what way can you make a single step, an inch toward that direction in your life. So it's just something I wanted to tease out just a little bit, just because I've done entire episodes just on that one subject to inspire people for that. So just hearing from somebody who is in the midst of, you've done that, you've been there and you're moving in that direction. That's just a piece of inspiration.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I will say it was pretty scary. I actually quit my job without having a real steady source of income.
Yeah.
And it was terrifying. I had to get very creative financially. My husband was working, but so it was something, but, I had to do a lot of inner work. Inner child, past life, all these ego writing tools and hypnotherapy to really like give myself the confidence to believe in myself enough that I could do something like this
Right.
It's scary. So I mean, I think that's important for people to hear. Like if you feel scared, it's because it is scary.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think, for me and for I've seen this with clients I work with too. The alternative is just they know what that's like. And for me, I certainly knew. I was like, I'm not going back there. Like, I don't care what I have to do. I'm not going back there. I am done. And sometimes, we do have to hit that point of, there's nowhere to go but up. And I also did it for my kids. Like that was the motivation because I wasn't with them as much as I wanted to be. And we started homeschooling our kids. And I think my kid I remember my son said to me one day, he said, I just want to be with you more. I want to be with you. And that like hit me so hard. So I just felt I had to, I was one of those parents moms that had to leave their kids at 3 months, and I would cry every day and, miss my baby. And I had some ways to see him. I was creative about it, but during the day, but when he said that to me, that really kind of made me realize like life is too short to be giving my energy to this place that doesn't seem to care about me. And so I want to do this for my children.
Yeah.
So that was a big motivation right there.
Yeah. And the thing is you're showing, not only that, you're showing your children how to dream as well. Like you're not just giving them your time, you're also down the road going to show them that they don't have to stick to something. And something, a very important lesson I've been trying to pass on to my son, who's, looking at colleges in the next few years. It's,
wow,
pick something that lights you up. And until you figure out what that is, just take your time. Like don't dive into something that you're going to
exactly
try to have to escape from years later. Like do something that lights you up.
Yeah. And, I think there's another term for that, which some people use. I don't know if you use this or other people, it's the matrix. It's like getting out of the matrix. It's freeing yourself from the slave system, which is my husband and I are both self-employed, and we feel like we were just saying this the other day, that I don't have to ask anybody permission to go to an appointment. I don't have to ask anybody, permission to take some time off. I can do whatever I want.
Right.
And, my livelihood is also my responsibility. So there's that, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And I feel like it's really just freedom. It's freedom. It's taking back our sovereignty and our ability to, create our own sort of lives for ourselves. And so I think it's so much, I think it is exactly what I try to teach my kids, that that you do not need to be part of this system. And that isn't to say that if somebody's listening and they're like, well, I am part of this system. I do think that there's always a reason. We have reasons. We're learning from that system. There's something that we're, our souls want to experience at some level. And so maybe that's okay. My son was in public school for a while, and that's okay. It was part of his learning experience in his life to understand what that was like. So I think it's all okay, right? It's different experiences, but ultimately I think this is where we're moving as a human race, is to sovereignty, personal responsibility, sustainability, helping each other, but through our own livelihoods like this.
Yeah.
I believe it.
It's funny because there's a demographic of people who see the opposite, and there's a whole demographic of people like you and I, and a whole lot of people that are interconnections that are seeing exactly what you said. There's a lot of division and reliance on that system that's building. It's getting worse with some people, and on the other side, there is the complete unreliance and realization that system is not a sustainable thing. That's not really the way that we can thrive as a species, as a collective. And so we're going in the opposite direction. It's almost like we're just heading into further polarities. The more we go in our direction, the more other people are going in theirs. But I don't know where that ends up going to, but it's just something I've noticed in recent years.
Yeah. I mean, I view it in terms of dimensions, like the 3D, the third dimension, and the 4D, which is like time and space moving through, an accelerated place where we're not meant to stay, and then to 5D, to fifth dimensional consciousness, which is, I know we're going to talk about the Akashic Records, so I'll just share this because I saw this in the Akashic Records. let me back up for a minute. So the fifth dimension is a way of being, a way of kind of like we were talking about, it being in unity and understanding and unconditional love and intuition and really a deep connection with the earth, kind of like our ancestors were, at least, and those beings or the humans that were on Atlantis and Lemuria, the ancient civilizations. And 3D would be everything we were talking about, the systems that are broken, separation, war, capitalism, just consumerism, all the things that, create suffering really and separation. And it's also just, it comes along with all those things we were talking about, the feelings of being stuck and not being able to get free from a life that you're not happy with. That'd be mired in the 3D kind of. Right. But so anyway, in the Akashic Records, I saw that as like two layers, like one of those old, you probably know this, hopefully some other people do too. I don't know, young people might not, but those old overhead projectors, when somebody would like put a little invisible slide, those transparencies on top of each other. Yep. And it was, they showed this to me. It was like, well, the 3D would be one transparency with some writing on it. And the 5D would be another one on top of it. And so if you looked at them on the screen, it looks like one picture together, but really it's two different planes, if that makes sense. And so that for me really helped me kind of understand what was happening, because like you said, I feel that too, that there's this, these subcultures of people. I feel like we're in that with this little homeschooling community we're part of, we're just doing our own thing. And I have neighbors whose kids go to public school and I see them, but I don't interact with them a lot. Right. They're very fine. They're nice people, but they're just not in my sphere. And so I feel like that's what it's a vibrational thing. Like when we give off a certain vibration, we end up attracting other people of that similar vibration. And if they're not of that vibration, which isn't to say it's good or bad, then we're just not going to be connecting with them as much and like on those different planes.
Yeah.
So more and more people are moving to 5D. So it's, it's a good thing, I think, but that's probably what it feels like.
Yeah. I feel like if you don't engage with the lower levels, because there's a lot of people who are they're so angsty in this world, somebody cuts them, little cut off in traffic or something and people just lose it. There's people who are in that, but it's almost like if it's not in your awareness, you're not there. Of course, you'll see clips of it on social media. You'll hear other people talk about those kinds of things, but in all reality, in my day to day, I don't often see that. And in the public realm, I've several different jobs within the public that I do now. I have to deal with them, and I can kind of see what those sort of angsty, divisional, never happy and always demanding type of attitudes are. But exactly what you were talking about when it comes to vibrational levels, that if you don't really operate in that level, it sort of nullifies it. I was just talking with Ben about this in the episode that we just did recently, about how the whole Hawkins scale of consciousness and people who operate at higher levels, those nullify the lower levels of vibration and stuff. And I've heard that described before where, if you had two people operating at a level 400 and whatever that is, I've really got to look this up because I talk about it all the time and I don't know what the levels are, but you have a couple people operating at a level 400 and you have one person who's operating at level 800. If those 400s are fear or jealousy or whatever, and the 800 is something near universal consciousness, connectedness, love, and all that vibration is pretty much canceling out the two people who are at the lower resonant level. And it's like, you can kind of see that on a day-to-day basis when you interact with some of these people who just are so wound up. If you don't give any energy to it, it sort of nullifies it. And it's exactly what you just said, that they don't even they might be in your awareness, but they're really not even in your sphere. You almost kind of just interact and you move on and you go on to doing whatever higher level stuff you were going to do throughout your day. And that's kind of what I've passed on to people when they talk about their frustrations of interacting with people in this world. It's like, well, try and operate at that higher level, because you're just going to come into that interaction and you're going to move right out. And hopefully maybe you've brought that person up just a little bit because you didn't bring yourself down to their level and operate at their level. So
I love that.
Yeah, I want to dive into the Akashic though. Like I want to,
Yeah, let's do it.
Stuff that fascinates me. And I guess I can preface this because a lot of people who listen to the show, it goes all over the place. We have different areas of interest that we talk about. And a lot of the people who watch this, because it's locally on one of our television stations here, and some people will listen to it, and it's stuff they've never heard of before. And I guess one way that I try to relate some of the, you know, what people might call woo-woo type stuff is I try and bring a scientific level of explanation to it, just sort of off the bat. It's, I guess, thinking about the Akashic is thinking of the law of conservation, the conservation of energy, where energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred. And the Akashic record, I guess, would be the energy of a level of consciousness that maybe existed before the life that you're in right now. Because the energy that you have of whatever your spirit, soul, whatever it is, had to come from somewhere. And when you're gone, it doesn't just dissipate and completely disappear. And I feel like that would be a good jump off to talk about your expertise on the Akashic.
Yeah, I mean, I can share what I believe about it and what I've picked up on it over the years. So, I mean, I think it might be helpful just to give people a baseline of what it is, what that word even means. The word Akash, you know, it's a Sanskrit word which means ether, or like the substance. It means ether, but I always say I describe it as the substance from which all things are born. So, so in the Akashic Records, and like, you know, I was saying, it's mentioned as a book of life in different religious texts, so you can see a lot of reference to it. It's a record of, really, it's for human souls, you know, so the record of a particular person's soul and all their past lives, information about that individual soul gifts, the lessons they're working on in each incarnation, their purpose. And so that's really what what a lot of people are interested in is that particular person's Akashic records. But there are Akashic records of the earth. There's Akashic records of like businesses. So I've gone into my Akashic records for my business, which is interesting. You can go into the Akashic records of your home, and like, it's because every one of these entities has history, right? So it's a divine space. It's a space filled with light. It's directly connected to divine source, to God. And there are light beings that show up in the Akashic records. And the way I like to describe it to people is they're like a council of elders, and sometimes I call them the masters. So when we all die, and some people who've had near-death experiences may have gotten to this point, but probably not, because then they wouldn't come back and they wouldn't be able to tell us about it. But there's been a lot of reports from people in past life regressions, and I've heard this from clients who I've done regressions for, and I've experienced it. When we die, you know, our souls leave our bodies and we go up, and we, you know, are greeted by a loved one or a spirit guide, a deceased loved one. And then eventually we get to a place where we're reviewing our life, and we're kind of, it's like, you know, they say, like, you know, your life flashed before you, different scenes of your life before you. And eventually we'll have an opportunity to reflect on what we did well, what we didn't do so well, how we hurt somebody maybe we weren't even aware of. And that's with the help of these council of elders, the masters. They're kind of helping us judge ourselves. And so when people say, oh, I'm going to be punished, you know, or I'm going to be, God is going to punish me, I'll be like, no. You're the only one judging yourself. They're helping you kind of reflect on it, but it's ultimately us that are, you know, kind of evaluating how it went and how we can learn. It's all about learning. You know, it's like going to the next grade, except for in school, you don't always have somebody evaluating us, but we're kind of working with this council that they're giving us guidance and advice, but ultimately we're making the decision. So in the Akashic records and readings, and for people that want to learn how to go in their own Akashic records, you can do that. You know, it's just take some training. I teach people how to do that all the time. We can get some hints. It's like, we don't have to wait till we die. We can get some hints now of like, well, why is this happening? And how can I deal with this person? And just like we were talking about, maybe I'm in a job I don't want to be in and I want to get out of it. What can I do? And so what happens is, when I go in the records, I have my eyes closed and it's really focusing on the energy. It's through the heart. I go in through light. It takes time to kind of train your mind to pick up on images and information in this very different way. I mean, it's intuition. But it's really energy. So you're just reading energy and following energy. And what will happen is information will come in that will be the truth. That is like a perspective that person may not have been able to see with their conscious mind. I just went in the Akashic Records just yesterday myself and was asking questions about different people in my family, somebody who has a health issue who I'm concerned about. And I was just looking at I was looking at what was going on with that person. This is somebody close to me. And so I was learning about this person's soul and how I was connected with that person and what I could learn, because I can't go in somebody else's records, but I can learn about it from as it affects me. And it was information that, my grandfather was coming in. It was talking about the ancestral bloodline and different things about this person that I wouldn't have thought of, or I didn't even know, actually. And it helped me come to a deeper understanding of him and really learn. It really was about letting go of my expectation of what I wanted this person to do and what I thought they should do to heal. But what was coming in was to stop doing that, just to let go, to just allow this person to have their experience and make their own choices and be sovereign, which is hard when it comes to health for some, for things like that. Anyway, but that's just an example of what can happen in the Akashic Records is just a huge shift just by hearing like some words or seeing a picture or getting some information that we wouldn't have otherwise have had access to with our conscious mind. I've seen this for people like so many times of different readings I've done. It's just, it really what it's about is it's coming into unconditional love for ourselves and for others and accepting ourselves with all the things we wish we hadn't done, or maybe, we beat ourselves up for things. It's normal human experience. And we hold grudges against people. And we, and ultimately they're really trying to teach us to let go of all that stuff, to forgive ourselves, have compassion for ourselves. And the other thing I'll say, one of the best teachers who helps me do that is Jesus. And in the Akashic Records, there are different guides like Jesus, like Mother Mary, like Buddha. Often they're otherwise we would call ascended masters that are affiliated often with a religion, but they'll come in for that person based on what that person might be comfortable with. So I grew up in a Christian church, and so I was familiar with Jesus. So that's why, I think it was Jesus. So I've done readings for people. I did some readings for a family in India, and they really connected with this guru who is also an ascended master named Babaji. And so Babaji was coming up for them. It was this beautiful guidance that I was picking up on. So it's just, and you can look at past lives and learn like what things we've carried, what experiences we've had in past lives that we're still carrying with us, that maybe, explains why we still have this particular thought pattern or habit or behavior. And it's from a past life. And then they'll share information about how to release that. You can look at future. That's pretty cool. I did that with during COVID. I remember being like, what the heck's going on? And then I was like, show me the future. And they showed me, it was interesting what they showed me. I never would have thought it was people eating outside. It was like little, everybody's eating outside, right? And that's what they showed me. But it was like all these people eating outside and parties in the streets. And they were showing me also but then there was a lot of places that were shut down, but it was actually a positive thing. It was interesting. Like that's what they chose to show me. Huh. They didn't show me the other stuff, but that's also the Akashic Records, because it's about, they don't want to create fear or anger, because that's not for our highest good. And there's a lot more I could say about that. But there's healing that can happen. Beautiful multidimensional beings like Pleiadians or Arcturians, they come in for me and help provide me healing. Sometimes for that client, those are high vibration galactic beings that people may or may not know about, but they're really amazing. And so there's a lot more I could say, but that's kind of gives people an overview of what's in there and what it's like.
So when you say that they don't want to spread fear and that's not the best way that we learn, do you feel like we've got something else going on here that's trying to do the opposite? Because it seems like when we're tapped into what you're talking about, amazing guidance comes through, and usually it's breakthroughs come down out of those information sessions. And what you even mentioned in the beginning of it is that it seems like yourself and a lot of other people, they hit that point where they're at their rock bottom, or they break down something in their life, and that's what sort of motivates them to make drastic change toward whatever it is, whether it's their health, their career, or their anything. And then we have these sort of aspects of the breakdowns of the propagation of fear. And it seems like there's nothing but that's constantly trying to pervade the human psyche lately. So again, talking about that division, it's like you have these higher portions of guidance that many of us don't tap into until sort of we're at that desperate breaking point. Are those polarities sort of at each other? Are they related to each other, of what you see sort of pervading the world in 3D right now versus the other things that are going on?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think I'm trying to decide how far down the rabbit hole I want to go with this, but
as far as you want to dive, because this podcast goes into all sorts of rabbit holes,
I mean, I think
you go as far as you want.
Yeah, I mean, I will go as far as I want. And I think I am going to allude to something which I think is important. This is what I believe and what I've picked up on, and for people who are listening, take it for what you will. If it doesn't resonate, that you can discard. But from everything I picked up on, what I believe is that our planet Earth has been in, sort of a controlled state of a prison sort of state for tens of thousands of years. And it really actually began around the time of the fall of Atlantis. And this has been written about in a lot of different books, when, the people of Atlantis, who we're connected to, human-like, went into ego, and we went into like arrogance. And there's also a lot of evidence about different extraterrestrial races that came in and were trying to intervene and control. And that, so it's been said that our planet has been in this state of that, the matrix we were talking about, having our consciousness be controlled and when I say controlled, what I mean by that is our intuition, our third eye, it has been dampened, has been blocked. And we've been in a state of separation from God, from source, not knowing that we are these amazing beings. And I know you know this because I know you teach this, that, we can manifest things with our thoughts. Our thoughts create our reality. That's the law of attraction. That's the law of resonance. And a lot of people don't know about that, or they may not believe it works, but it does work. Yeah. And as I know, right? Yeah. And it's just that we often have a lot of crap in there that our own thoughts or our beliefs that will block, our thoughts. So anyway, but when we don't know that we have these abilities that, like Jesus did, like some of these amazing, saints or ascended masters that we heard about doing these, telekinesis or spontaneous healings, and we have those abilities, but we just don't believe we do. And we also don't have the training, most of us. So we have been basically controlled by fear, through our own emotions. That's how our consciousness has been controlled, I believe. And I know a lot of people talk about this too. So through fear and anger, that's how we have been in this state of control, through those emotions of fear and anger. So as many of us are experiencing, you and a lot of people you interview, and probably a lot of people listening, we're going through this awakening process where we begin to understand that we've actually been in that state of illusions and been lied to, and been had, the news media really is the primary source, but it goes through public school, it goes through all kinds of other systems, pharmaceutical drugs, like all these things trying to keep us, asleep. Our third eye is blocked, so we didn't have access to those psychic abilities and those gifts. And so that's the 3D, right? That is the fear and the anger. And so as we move through, this is all perfect that we've been talking about this, as we move through the different dimensional states, there's still a lot of fear and anger, when we go down the rabbit conspiracy theory, we quote, because that's a term created to
I can't stand
discredit
that
people,
term.
right? I know.
Oh, I
know
stand
it's so annoying. It's like that was just created just to discredit people seeking truth, but that, I certainly went down that rabbit hole, and I was in a lot of fear. No, maybe not fear, actually. I was mostly in anger. Mostly angry.
Yeah.
And a little scared about what, they're going to do this. What are they going to do now? And so maybe there was some fear, but as and honestly, it really has been the Akashic Records that have taught me to do this, because I want to be like, what are they doing with COVID? Like, what's their agenda? And, I kind of have some idea. I'm pretty sure I do know what it is, but they didn't want me to focus on it that way. They wanted me to focus on forgiveness, even though there's been all these things that, we see, there's 5G, there's chemtrails, there's all these other things with, the COVID, propaganda and all the other propaganda that went along with it, that can create a lot of anger, because we don't like, who likes that being done to us, but what they show me in the Akashic Records is the more we give energy to that, the more power we give it, so it's like, the goal is, and this is what, like you said, you don't see a lot of that stuff now. That's kind of how I try to operate. So I see what's happening. I see, I saw some chemtrails just the other day, and I see the things that I realize, the programming, the poisons and all that stuff, but I try not to focus on it. Instead, I try to transmute it and just rise above and do what I do in my work to try to help people awaken. Because ultimately, when we awaken, we then learn to connect with unconditional love and forgiveness, and forgive those, for they know not what they do, and that it's easier said than done. That's why I'm laughing.
Way easier said than
done. Easier said than done. But that's ultimately really what the guides, the masters in the Akashic Records, and so many other divine beings are trying to help us with, to kind of connect with that tool. Love is a vibration, but it's the strongest vibration there is, that it dissolves all the others. And then when we're coming from that place of love and forgiveness and compassion and understanding and empathy, then we can no longer be controlled.
Yep.
Because, and I'll say that to people, like, if you're watching all these videos and they're just making you mad and you're going down the rabbit hole, how is that really helping you? Because are you just in a state of fear and anger? Because if you're in a state of fear and anger, then you're still being controlled. Mm-hmm. Do you know?
Yeah. It is. It's just a manipulation in a different direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many things that are coming to a boiling point, though, that the more people are awakening, and that's a natural part of the process too. For a lot of people, like I said, there's a whole spectrum of people who listen to this show. It's the people who are like, what is a chemtrail? Like, they've never heard of it before. And then there's other people who are very well aware of what it is and what they are and what 5G is doing and what fluoride, even down to, like, I want to dive into that for a minute because of just how much you talked about how the third eye was being blocked, and
yes.
Just in the 20th and 21st century, how there was definitely efforts towards a physical factor to inhibit our ability to have intuitions. But the more that people wake up to it in the early stages of it, like, go back to the Matrix analogy, where they say after a certain age, they didn't wake people up in the movie. And, it's because people had a hard time breaking away from the program. And people do, they have a very hard time accepting that this world has so many different points of attack on the average person. And, you have kids. I guess it's easier if you don't have kids, because you're just kind of worried about yourself. You're worried, it's like, I can take care of myself, but these are direct attacks on me and my family. And you go down that very angry, like you said, you go sort of like a fearful sense, and that doesn't last very long. It then goes into anger, where it's like everything is bad, from your food to this, that, and the other thing. But you also, at a certain point, have to release the things that you don't have control over. You might see wars happening around the world and be totally against the war, or, against a certain aspect of the war, whatever it is. And you can do certain things, I guess, to voice the opinion, but ultimately you shouldn't get yourself so wound up over things you can't control. Mother Teresa, I remember there was a famous thing, and I've talked about it before, how they wanted to get her to protest against the Vietnam War back in like the 70s. And she said, no, I won't do that. Have a rally for peace and I'll be there. because she didn't want to give the energy to the fact of
Yes.
war. She wanted to give the energy to the fact of peace. So it's almost
Yeah.
at a certain point, you have to wonder, you get down to the concepts and theories of, the matter emerging from consciousness. These things are putting your awareness is more of your own individual awareness, adding energy to things. If your whole entire existence and reality is emergent from your consciousness, is your own little world spinning more out of control than someone else's little branch of a different reality that it's heading into. It gets in some, that's a rabbit hole that is a whole 3-hour show, but you have to wonder how far down that goes. But like I was saying, the more people that are aware of these things, they listen to stuff like what you and I are talking about and what Brandon talks about in his show and everything, they listen to it and they become much more aware. And then in my own perspective of what I'm seeing lately, I'm seeing more acts of desperation from the powers that be, that they are doing everything they possibly can to grasp onto and maintain control, and they're losing it. There's like, these are the dying gasps of a realm of existence that is likely going to fade away. It's going to be sort of a bad blemish in human history. But the more that people do wake up, it's steamrolling, and it's just that snowball that keeps getting bigger and bigger. And as people, as they see the headlines that Tennessee's banning chemtrails and New Hampshire just banned chemtrails, like they're actually in their legislation that they're doing things like, it's fascinating.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
I think it's Tennessee, New Hampshire, and maybe I think Louisiana. I'm getting it wrong. It's either Tennessee did it and Louisiana's on the cusp, or vice versa. But New Hampshire definitely did, because they're right next door to us. And I'm like, wow, but good
that's cool.
So yeah. And then you get people who I don't know if you know what Nextdoor is. It's like
yes, that little app. Yes, that
app, and it's like a forum where people, and someone just mentioned something about it, and oh my god, the land-based things.
I saw a big debate on Facebook about it. I was like, I'm not touching that.
Oh my god. I got called a flat earther. I got called so many different things.
Yes.
And I'm literally just throwing news articles at these people from their quote unquote legitimate news sources, which it was MSNBC and all the places I don't trust. But I'm like, okay, well, these guys are talking about the silver iodide that's getting sprayed on people, and the aluminum and barium that they're finding in the snow on Mount Shasta that's obviously falling from the sky. Like, there's articles talking about this stuff from legitimate studies, but it's still, I'm the crazy person. But,
right. It goes, so because people, I think people have a really hard time believing that their government would poison them.
Right.
It's just too painful. And then it goes, and then what else does it apply to? So, this could be a whole nother topic of just how is that possible? But it's a cognitive dissonance, It
is. And that's really tough for people to come over. But I used to have, so when I first learned of the term cognitive dissonance, I want to say it was maybe 3 to 4 years ago. It was shortly after I started the podcast, and I was starting to talk about things, little tidbits here and there, and starting to get a lot of kickback from certain people, whether it was people from the show or people who were in my everyday life, and they'd either listen to something about it and be like, you really believe that stuff that you talk about on the podcast? I'm like, I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't, But it was like, you know what? I didn't think that they would ever, quote unquote, get it. And those people are actually starting to get it. And I think the events over the last 3 or 4 years and seeing the manipulation that they were duped into over certain things has really woken people up. I think the opposite happened of what the intentions were of everything throughout the last 4 years. And that gives me optimism. That gives me a lot of optimism.
Yes, me too. And I have some clients who, I was just talking to someone about this the other day, because it can be really depressing when you think about all this stuff. It's like, this is the kind of world I want to live in. And it's like, no, people are awakening. And I think, for a while there's been division and people in the awakening community who talking about people who are asleep and, the sheep and that, and I'm sure I did that at one point myself, but I'm not proud of it, and I now, believe that, and I see it, like you said, that everybody has the opportunity to awaken. We're all feeling these energies. Some of us awakened earlier than others to kind of help teach. And man, like you just said, I spoke out in the past few years, and I definitely took a beating for it in certain areas. but but I had to do it. I was like, I see something that's wrong, and I can't not say anything.
Yeah.
I feel like that was my job. But now I'm kind of like, all right, well, I'm going to help in a different way and help people awaken in a different way, instead of just trying to drop some truth bomb on them. So it doesn't always work.
It does,
but yeah. But I think, like having compassion, and that's really what it's funny, I've been really guided to that with people who may not see things the way I do now, or or for whatever it's worth, but they're doing the best they can. They're doing the best they can with the tools they have. It's not their fault. At some level, it's just not their fault. They've been victims of the programming, just like I once was myself,
Yeah.
So I
drank the Kool-Aid in the beginning of COVID.
Oh yeah.
Oh, big
you
time.
did?
Oh, totally. I was bringing my groceries home and wiping them down with like disinfectant wipes and
so
stuff.
So COVID helped wake you
3
up.
weeks. Yeah, sort of. Like in the beginning, because I have a background in emergency management and and all that stuff. Like we've done studies on prepping for pandemics for decades, and then when this hit, I'm like, oh, here it is. Like this was the zombie apocalypse. It was on top of us. It was the movie. Oh geez, what's the one when the person gets bit by the monkey and Ebola goes everywhere? But yeah,
I know the movie.
Oh yeah, it was for me. It was that, and then all of a sudden I started paying attention. I'm like, nope, this is nowhere near. But some people never did.
Some people never did, right? And I know I saw it from the beginning, but I started. I said to my husband, "This is going to be. They're going to start doing masks, and this is all about a vaccine. Like that's the end goal."
Yep.
And I said, "I hope I'm wrong."
And that's the thing. Is that
it all happens.
Always hope that we're wrong. That's the one thing I don't think a lot of people understand is that when we're talking about some of this stuff and we're talking about the awakening, and I want to get into a little bit of like the ego stuff with the whole, you talked about the whole sheep and everything, that whole mindset, because a lot of people feel like some of us feel like they feel like we are holding ourselves on a higher pedestal, which I've seen it, but everybody who's oh, geez, where was I just going to go on that?
Well, we were talking about seeing, or I was talking about seeing it like from the beginning, but
I lost my train of thought. That doesn't happen very often, but
it'll come back.
Oh, it'll come back. But yeah, with the ego stuff, I definitely did an episode on this just recently in the last couple of months about spiritual snobbery, and I think that goes along with the whole awakening and the sheep stuff. And I've even been guilty of calling people, sheep. I've just seen them because it was really hard. It was really hard to not get ensnared in that tangle of a mess of the conflict that happened between, the whole COVID era became political as well, but it was hard to not get ensnared in, because at a certain point you're trying to talk to people about something that could be a life and death decision and other things that were a huge loss of freedoms. And it turned really nasty. And I think that's where a lot of that came from. And then I think a lot of us who came out the other side were more, we're not going to forget about the way that you treated us. We're not going to forget about the fact that you told some of us that we didn't deserve a hospital bed for taking something that ultimately never worked. Right. So we understand that there are certain people, at least I do, that you can't really get mad at them, just like you couldn't get mad at your dog for not knowing how to use the toilet and flush it, like you, and I know that's a really insensitive. I'm not calling people dogs in the dogs.
I know.
But I'm saying it's
the like, consciousness, the level of consciousness wasn't there, right?
Yep, exactly. Right. But so, I'm sure you've seen this a lot. Like you're in a lot of these circles and you've seen sort of the inflated egos of the people who are the teachers. And I actually think I've heard you talk about this someplace before. About how people can end up sort of in that place of leadership and they end up a little high on their horse. Yeah. And that leads to a whole level of ego that's crazy.
The ego is it's very slippery. It can come in many different ways, and narcissism and, just thinking that we know more. And that's, I come back to the Akashic Records all the time, because that was something that I learned, was to not think that I knew more than somebody else. It was just a different level. It's like you wouldn't say to, 11th grader wouldn't say to a 7th grader, I'm better than you because I'm in 11th grade.
Exactly.
No, I'm just in a different grade level than you are. And and that may sound strange, like levels, but everything I've picked up on in the spirit realm, there really are, that is kind of how it works. We evolve and go up in different, stages of our awareness, literally through colors. Like we move through these it gets to be higher, like purple and blue, and then even red. And then if we really do a lot of inner work, we might become a spirit guide and guide somebody else. And then if we do a lot of work and we, transcend the ego completely, we may not need to incarnate any longer and become an ascended master, which is very rare. But, probably somebody like Gandhi might be an ascended master, maybe Mother Teresa, So yeah, I think it really is about transcending ego. And and the ego is similar to that intervening negative consciousness I was talking about from some would call it extraterrestrial consciousness that, kind of created this sort of in our brains, this part of us that fuels on fear, that it's fueled by fear. And I just want to say really quickly, because I think this is really important. It's been predicted, like in the Mayan calendar and the Incan calendar, that there would be an age of awakening, and that we are in this stage as the age of Aquarius. So it's happening. Like it is happening. And some people think, no, it's going in hell in a handbasket, where it's like the apocalypse. And like you were saying before, that is really just the dying flame, flames of the 3D world. That it's, the flame, before it flares, when we blow out a candle, it often expands before it's extinguished. And that's what we're seeing is like the last, flame of the dying 3D. So I think that's important for people to see. Yes, we do have free will. And so it's ideally we want to keep, you, me, a lot of us here who are doing our best to bring light, to keep taking actions, making choices to keep us on that ascension timeline. Because there are different timelines. And I've actually had clients who've said, well, I've seen a timeline that's really dark, and I'll be, yeah, but that's just one timeline. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen that way.
Right.
So anyway, but yeah, I think and that really is ultimately how we get to that timeline, is moving beyond ego. And it starts with our inner work, as within, so without, and quieting our mind and becoming aware of the thoughts we're having, that I'm not, I can't, it will never, people don't, those sorts of thoughts that are just like the all or nothing, clearing away the limiting beliefs about ourselves. And and then it has a ripple effect. We give off that when we start to be in that state of accepting and loving ourselves more, then other people feel it too, because we're giving off that vibration literally just emits from us. And they start to feel, like you were saying, that they can't, like the higher vibrations canceling out the lower ones.
Yeah.
They start to feel it too. And then we all begin to move into these higher states of consciousness. So it's really an awesome, amazing time to be alive. It just takes a long time, because it takes like in tiny incremental steps. It can be hard to see it, but it's happening.
It's happening. And it takes a long time in our terms, but if you look at the evolution of the species in general, like if you look at where we as a human society, and like by no means do I think we are at a pinnacle right now of human existence. I think that we have hit maybe a couple of other previous, I want to say I'm probably at the mindset of having that we've had maybe at least two, and one of them was very, very long time ago, whether that was us coming from another place or whatever, but there's definitely been a broader civilization that has not been acknowledged here. And a lot of that stuff is definitely coming out. You definitely have some people who are, which I get a little bit suspect of anything that's on like mainstream TV, like History Channel and stuff like that. But there is undeniable. I've friends who are in archaeology and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, a lot of new discoveries are completely squashed because it completely wrecks the years worth of teaching that someone did and the thousands of students they might have taught, especially if something comes through that disproves everything they learned. I'm like, well, it's kind of messed up, isn't it? Like, I'm sure there were schools at some point in the world that taught that the world was completely flat and now it's round. And then to some people it's flat again. Like I know the flat thing. And, it's like, that's where it can be like some conspiracy theories are not necessarily true. And that, or like, I'm pretty sure the earth is not flat, But, I could be wrong. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Anything could be possible, but anything could be possible. But,
that's sometimes things like, anyway, I mean, you can go into paranoia, it's easy to slip into
Definitely.
paranoia. And I think that's when, for me personally, having that tool of, really being like, okay, I need to connect back into like my center, connect back into truth, into light. And ultimately we can transmute that stuff with our light, all that stuff, all the light that we innately have, that is that source energy within us. When we connect with that and amplify it, we can, overcome it. And there's so many different ways to do that, as you know. So,
and I think one of the things that is the most inspiring is just the community portion of what you end up finding when you start diving into some of this stuff. First, you'll find the people who they're really deep in every conspiracy. Like anything that pops up, they're all about it. But then you start to realize that some of them, maybe they're true, but it's a stretch. And there's other things, you pretty much don't want to rule out anything, especially if they're keeping score over the last 5 years alone. They're kind of killing it. There's a lot of conspiracy theorists that are kind of killing it.
Yeah.
But you just basically have to keep an open mind on everything and not jump on any ship. You got one foot on both of them, and as soon as one hits the rocks, the other one is the one that you're going to step off onto. So
totally.
I
and
think
some of it's a choice too. It's like, do you want to believe that or not? Like, do you want to believe that the eclipse was really a space, like there was a space station and it was dark, energy with this eclipse? Or do you want to believe that it was a beautiful healing thing? Because I have had people, I who knows, right? But I was like, I'm going to choose to believe the latter, that it was beautiful and healing, not that it was some dark thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Especially the fact that they had this thing predicted for way longer than we've actually had the ability to, they can predict these things with pinpoint accuracy for decades out. So, but no, I saw that eclipse as something, as something amazing, just as my own personal thing, because it was a 7-year period between the last one and this one. And if you bookended that period of my life, like the transition, I hope I don't ever have a transition period that big ever again. Cause I went from a really deep sort of dark night of the soul when that other one was going on, like in the midst of that last eclipse. And then fast forward to where I was now. And it was just like an amazing experience. Well,
7 is a sacred number, It
is, the chakras, the 7 years of, like they say that we go through 7-year periods of life and different growth periods and stuff. And this one matches that age period of what you go through from 35 to 42. So it's that it was literally I was at 35 that year and 43 this year, but it was like there with it. So it was definitely a deeply spiritual experience. Yeah. And again, it's that, what does your reality paint for you? If you think it was something dark, you didn't get anything near out of it that I did, so.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about, like we were talking about in the beginning with, it can be really hard to do that, to just kind of flip a switch and say, I'm going to focus on this now, and I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to try to be loving. I'm going to try to forgive myself and forgive other people. But there are ways to kind of, I don't want to say fast track it, but help our brains, because there are neural pathways that get to be kind of embedded. The more we think a certain thing repeatedly, it becomes like muscle memory. And then we wake up the next day and that's just how we start thinking. But with a lot of people are interested in psychedelics. There's a lot of stuff happening with psychedelics. It's changing the brain, changing the neural pathways. And then of course, hypnotherapy. And I like to I'm starting to learn a lot more about neuro-linguistic programming. I don't know if you've heard of that. NLP.
Yep.
It's basically a form of hypnotherapy. And so these are basically psychedelics, hypnotherapy, meditation, NLP. There's different things, EMDR, though they create altered states of consciousness. So going in the Akashic Records, these are altered states of consciousness that allow us to access different parts of our brain and then create new neural pathways that allow us to do all the things we were talking about, start to transcend the ego, let go of stuff. I mean, from the very like basic day-to-day level, it's let go of the grudges, of the shame, of the guilt, of what we're beating ourselves up for, and let go of grudges against other people and things that we're angry at somebody else for, or whatever it is. So there's ways to do it. And I think, meditation is the basic, the foundation. Like that's the way to start, is just start quieting the mind, and then it starts to change the brain. So, but I think it gets, and then meditation, I will say, isn't going to be like the solution. It's going to help a lot of people, but if there's deep trauma there's going to be more healing that's required to really change that, because if it's from childhood, that can get really embedded in the subconscious mind. And then what happens is you can talk about it all day, but if it's buried in the subconscious, we can't access it until we clear away the conscious mind and get into the subconscious mind to begin to access it. So I think, there's hope. There's like ways to do this, and everybody's going to feel guided to different things, and everything. There's different things that will work for different people. But I think my point is that there's tools. There's a lot of tools out there that people can access pretty easily. So.
And the tools often that people will turn to when they're in the state where they need to turn to some kind of a tool, it's usually a vice that's not ever going to give them the solution. And it's too readily available. And it's definitely easy. I often make the comparison that, if you're an athlete or a weightlifter, it's easy to start taking things like HGH and steroids and everything else. And it's like, okay, you might get the results you want, but ultimately it's not doing you any good in the long run.
Yes.
The longer route, it might take a lot longer. You might not get as big as fast and everything else, but the long run is going to be the more rewarding run. And when you take these routes, meditation was really hard for me when I first started doing it. And just like what you said, that totally hit home with me, where there was other stuff deeper, because when I tried to quiet the mind, there were still some things that were popping up. And that was the surface level stuff that I could identify. So I had to move past some of those traumas that were more like right on the surface. And then those led into digging deeper and clearing out that entire chest. So now meditation is like a non-negotiable theme for me. Like I absolutely have to do it. It's supposed to be every day. And I've just been so busy lately. It's the first time since I discovered it that I've let it fall off more than I wanted to. But being able to get into that state if you know what I'm talking about, if you can get to that zero thought place, which it's kind of rare for me to get into that zero thought place. There's nothing like it. And then once you're there, the rest of your day is it's indescribable. But then I've also recently had somebody tell me the tool of like, okay, well, once you can get yourself to that zero state, like go there, and that's sort of like your warm up for the day. But then go into places and do other different things. Even just go for walks in nature. And, the Conversations with God book came to mind, just because that's pretty much what they said. They're like, you know what, have conversations out, go for a walk in the woods and just have a conversation out loud and start asking some of the questions in your life and things you want answers to. And literally the first thing that comes up is the response. That is the response. And I've tried that. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to start going for a walk with a book in my hands and start writing some of this stuff down, because it was some of the most amazing stuff. So I think people hearing that, like someone like me, people, when they first heard that I meditated, it was like, oh my God, dude, you meditate? It's like, yes. And now as a part of my life, I'm like, I'm not only do that, but I am like an advocate, I'm like, I'm not just a client, I'm the president. Like I love meditation's amazing. And I don't think it can, there's one of the things in your life that can benefit you the most. And it's something that costs nothing. But like you said, it does definitely take some steps to get to the place where it's extremely beneficial. And I think you have to go with somebody who knows what they're doing too.
Right. That's true. Ultimately what it is, when you said conversations with God, it reminded me that we are connecting with God, with that God essence, with, and with traditional religions, there's, hopefully I won't offend people by saying this, but, a lot of people have been taught that God was something outside.
Yeah.
And, like, is it really a man who floats in the sky? But really, in my belief, at least, it's within us. It's everything. That source energy is within every leaf and rock and creature and within us, our souls. And so the suffering that so many people are in is because we become disconnected from that, and not remembering that is who we are. And so when we meditate, I believe, at least, because I feel it, just like you said, we're connecting with that again. We're like plugging back in.
Right.
And it can be really something that's very difficult to describe. But when when you're in that space of no thought, it's just like, it's just oneness. It's just, peace.
Yeah.
And when I've done, it's interesting because when I've done, I do something called life between life regression sometimes for people, where you guide them into the spirit realm and into like meeting their soul group and meeting different spirit guides. It's just amazing experience. But when I've done that for people, sometimes they will literally describe that they just say, I'm in front of this huge light. It's like the sun, and they just are quiet, and they're just, it's, God, it's source. And they're just saying, this is the source. And it's just pure love. And that's all. And then there's no other words, it's just, and then I just leave them alone and let them enjoy that connection. Yeah. But I think that is why meditation, when we get to that space of quiet, that's probably why it feels so good, because we're reconnecting with that. We're disconnecting from ego, from separation, and reconnecting with oneness, and then eventually, the more we do that, we start to feel more compassionate towards our fellow human, even if that person did just call us a name and, try to make us feel less than or whatever. But then we're like, you know what, but it's okay. I love you. And I see beneath those layers of fear that you are just like me, and that we are all one. And yeah, I mean, and that ultimately that's the 5D, right? That's where we want to be, where we want to get to in 5D. But we got to get through we've got to get through the crap, clear away some of the crappiness to get to that. So,
and thing is with religion, in the modern versions, they'll tell you of what you and I do, we just talked about over the last 3 minutes alone. They'll tell you that in and of itself is something of new age, and they may not straight up call it Satanistic, but some of them do. They'll say that the thought and belief of God being within you, and that it's not outside, and it's not something that you need to worship, fear, or whatever they want to put at you. They'll tell you that is the wrong way. But if you look deep into a lot of religions at their roots, I feel like I have this conversation almost on every single episode, but it ultimately goes back to how they were manipulated and diverged. And if you go back to original teachings that led to a lot of the mainstream religions now, they will talk about that it is within, it always has been within. Mm-hmm. And like the Gospel of St. Thomas and a few other books that were taken out of the Bible, they specifically point to that. And in my own personal opinion, I think that's why they were taken out, was because you didn't have to go to a church or a guy in a special costume to have you get a connection to God. It was like something that it was deep within you already, and you pretty much just need to figure out, get through all the BS in your life to reestablish that connection. We came here to sort of forget the connection, and the game is to sort of reestablish that connection. And I think when a lot of people realize that, we're reading the book. I don't know if you ever heard the book Oneness that we're actually reading on the podcast.
Who wrote it?
Rasha, an author called Rasha.
No, but I'll have to check it out. Huh.
I got it right here. The cover might look familiar. No, that's not it. Uh-oh. Knock the camera on the way over.
Sorry, I can still see you.
So does that look familiar?
Ooh, I like that cover. That is beautiful.
So here's my plug for the book then, because we're on to like chapter 10. I think we just finished 9 and 10. I'm reading basically 2 chapters every few weeks on the show, so you can get it for free on there. But it's a fantastic book. This woman had a dialogue, I want to say over like 5 years, with a consciousness that just described itself as oneness. And it just, the amount of stuff that came through the very first time I actually listened to the book on audio on another podcast. And I worked with her just recently to get the rights to read it on this one, because that other podcast happened to read it at random chapters, because you can pretty much read any chapter. It's not sequential. Okay. We're going cover to cover, but I mean, the stuff that comes through is a lot of the stuff that we're actually talking about today in a roundabout way, about how every person you interact with and every person you come across is that part of that same consciousness and oneness. And, that whole information integration, you ever hear that concept of, was like, you can know something, but until you've integrated it in your life and applied it, you don't really, really know it. So yes, I've listened to this book and I've read it a million times, and I'm reading it on the podcast, and I still have a very challenging time on a day-to-day basis, in the moment, entangled in certain conflicts, to recognize like, this person is actually an extension of me, and they're showing me something that's very valuable in this lesson of exchange that I'm having right now. I don't have it until they walk away. I guess as you get more experience, you'll have it more in the moment. But that's I basically just kind of like relating some of my own experience to what you're talking about, because it's a fascinating subject.
It is cool, and I think it's a process. I mean, if you figured out how to do that, like you were instantly doing, like, I mean, you would probably become an ascended master, because like it's hard.
It is very hard.
I mean, we all have that, our conditioning, we have the programming, we have all that stuff that we're healing from, not just this life, but past lives, that all kinds of crap and really awful things have happened in past lives and different, the Crusades, the Middle Ages, war. I mean, I've seen so many different past lives for people, and a lot of it was a lot of suffering, not all bad, but there's some really good things, like when, being a druid, or, I've seen, anyway, there's some cool past lives, Native American past lives that I picked up on people. I've heard in regressions, but, I will just I wrote a book a few years ago that, if you don't mind, I'll just mention it real quick, because it's called literally Tools for the Awakening Soul, a guide to activate your intuition and uncover your life's purpose. It's a long subtitle, but if anybody, I was talking about tools, and there's a lot of tools in there. So if anybody is interested in getting like stuff about how to do meditation, how to connect with intuition, clear the ego, there's a bunch of ego stuff in there, writing exercises, guided meditations. I put in some stories about my own life and case studies with clients. There's a lot of stuff in there. And there's an ebook as well that if anybody wants to check it out. Just didn't want to forget to mention it.
We'll also link that in the show description, as well as your website and everything, because those kind of things, if people are very interested in, want to connect with you deeper, that's definitely one of the ways to do it.
Yeah.
So, talking about what you do with working with people, how can people reach you if they want to reach you for maybe an Akashic Records session? Yeah.
Probably the best way is my website, soulfulworkconsulting.com. And then there's there's just buttons that say, read contact. You could just send me a little email through the website, tell me what you're experiencing or looking for, and I'll respond, or just, there's all kinds of different things on there. So yeah.
Awesome. And, I actually didn't ask my cliche question that I ask of everybody when they first come on the show. I completely boneheaded it. And I'm going to skip over it just because it's usually in the beginning of the show, but I actually have a new thing that I've been doing towards the end of episodes that a recent listener or a recent guest on the show inspired me to incorporate. If you had to give this time period of your life a one-word description, maybe two or three if you had to, what would this time period represent that you're currently in right now?
Time period of my life. I have to use the word, you just said this word, but it's just coming to me. The word is integration. So yeah, integrating a lot of different things, integrating light, integrating experiences.
I think
that sums it up.
I think those things teach us the patience and grace to deal with everything that we're dealing with this world. And when you tap into a lot of the stuff that you're tapped into, it is somewhat overwhelming. Like there's just a lot that you're trying to take in, at the same time deprogram yourself and reprogram yourself and still function as a normal, quote unquote, normal person in this world. But
I just said that to a client the other day. I was like, like those shows when you have like the alien or the extraterrestrial is on Earth and they put on like human skin to try to fit in. I was like, I think that's kind of what we're all doing a little bit. Just try to not talk about the stuff that sounds totally crazy, but
at the same time, it still leaks out.
Exactly. Right. I mean, but
we make a podcast so we can go do that.
Exactly. Right. That's the safe place.
Yeah. All right, Rachel, I think we're at a good spot to wrap it up, and we're already about the time frame that we were going to end up cutting it off at. So this has been a great conversation, and it's been a pleasure actually being able to connect with you finally after like 2 years of circling around each other. And
I know. Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and there was a lot of deeper rabbit holes we could have dove down. So we may try to elicit your return later on down the road.
Yeah. Especially if I get to chat with Ben too. That'd be so cool.
That would actually be pretty cool. That might be a really good idea to get Ben on here. We could have a conversation.
Yeah. That'd be cool. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
And all the ways to find Rachel, again, are going to be in the show notes and the show description with the link and her book and every other way you can reach her. Thank you, Rachel.
Many blessings. Thank you.